I'm Dr. Kerry Heller, and welcome back to this episode of Being the Best Version of Yourself. Today, we're going to talk about what does it actually mean to be the best version of yourself. Probably depends who you ask. I mean, really, I guess the idea here is that each person's different in what this actually means to them. Ideally, or in most cases, it probably means, being sort of the best you can at something, whether it's, being a good parent, a good child, or son, daughter, being, the best you can at work, whatever it is. And also that gets at the idea that, people will vary in terms of what's really important to them. Some people, job is sort of the whole identity, it's extremely important. For others, it's more, it's a means of a paycheck. So I think that in itself is going to depend how important is, your job as part of, who you are as a person and, being the best version of yourself. So then that gets at the idea of how do we go about deciding, what would mean the best version of ourselves? Because if you want to make changes, you have to figure out where you actually want to start in order to accomplish something. Otherwise, it's going to be something very abstract that even if it's great to know that information, you're not going to be able to do anything with it tangibly to actually make a change. While there are probably several different ways to go about determining what are the things most important to you in order to be the best version of yourself, I've simplified this for our purposes into 3 categories of personal, professional, and traits. You can choose to use these categories of personal, professional, and traits, or if there's other ways that you would prefer to break it down, please feel free to create your own categories or add to mine and then continue on in this exercise. So now that we have the categories, under each category, I would like you to identify one concrete thing that you would want to improve on in some way in order to be the best version of yourself in each of those categories. So for example, with personal, maybe it's being a better spouse, a better parent. Maybe it's being a better friend. Having something very tangible in terms of a starting point, and then from there you can obviously break it down and examine, if you're going to say, I'm going to be a better spouse, what does that look like? Does that mean listening more, offering to help more? Whatever it is, having a concrete way of doing that is going to help you to give you something to follow through on towards improving and being the best version of yourself in that way. In terms of the category of professional, again, this is really going to vary based on how important a job is to you and whether it's about just getting the job done for personal paycheck versus doing the best job that you can or developing yourself professionally. But so, some common ideas of maybe things to improve on towards being the best version of yourself professionally might be to be more efficient with your time. Be able to be more outgoing towards helping people, depending on where your job is. Be a better team player. Be, more creative. I mean, it really depends where your job is in the first place, because that's really going to make this vary. But just, having at least one tangible thing that you can do to make a difference will help you towards being goal-oriented, towards making a positive change in your professional life. The last category is traits. Obviously, this one's a little bit more open-ended, and it's hard because it's difficult to capture everything about a person into 3 categories, but this was sort of a good starting point to try to make this exercise as simple as possible. With traits, it's the idea of, whether it's maybe, being outgoing, helpful, conscientious, responsible, getting stuff done, being efficient. Think about traits that define you or that you would like to define. So maybe you want to be a person who's, always on time and is, always the first one to offer to help, but maybe you don't find yourself in quite that way. So here's your opportunity to identify what is important to you and to make that change. All right, so now that you've identified at least 3 things that you want to make changes on, if not more, it's okay, you're welcome, certainly can add more. Make sure that what you have written down is something that is very easy to know how to execute. So, the idea of, being a better spouse, looking at what is that going to look like in concrete terms. I know I mentioned before the idea of, maybe listening more, offering to help. But make sure that whatever you've written down is something that's very tangible and easy to essentially measure. Are you doing it? Are you not doing it? Because now your job is to take at least 3 things that you've come up with and start thinking through how can you start implementing these things in order to make these positive changes. The first step in making any changes are really to be consciously aware of a need or a desire to make these changes. And so hopefully through this exercise, you've already accomplished that part. So now the next thing is, look at these things and think about how to implement them. If it's easier start with one. So maybe start with the first category, personal. Start thinking through, let's say, again, we'll use the example of being a better spouse. So pick at least one thing from that and start working on that first. And then once you start accomplishing that, if it's easier, then continue on. I mean, obviously, in reality, you can't really live your life in sort of a vacuum of, just the personal category, professional traits. Obviously, it might be easier in some ways if that was how life was, but it's not really how it works. So you kind of have to really, in real life, do all sort of three at once. But if, for purposes of getting yourself going to be sort of the best version of yourself that you can be, it's easier to just start with one and then go from there. By all means, go for it. So I hope that this little activity is helpful in getting you thinking on really how to be the best version of yourself, with not just an abstract sense of it, but now coming away from this podcast with a few concrete ideas of your own of how to execute it. And certainly if you're trying to execute and it's not working, that's where you need to take a step back and figure out, why can't I remember to do this? What's not working? And because as long as you keep trying and making attempts and trying to do something differently to make it work, you're far more likely to be able to have good success over time in doing it. But if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to probably get the same result. You're not going to magically get a different result in most cases. So I hope that this is helpful for you in your mission towards being a better version of yourself. Until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Kerry Heller.